Hello everyone, my name's Aaron Christensen, this is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and welcome back to The Stack. Today we're going to be talking about The Abandoned, now available from Unearthed Films. This is the first feature film by Nacho Cerda, who kind of blew the festival doors open with his short films Aftermath from 1994 and Genesis from 1998. Aftermath had made a huge sensation when it first was hitting the festival circuit. It eventually had its North American premiere at Fantasia Film Festival in, I think, 1997 or 98. And that was where Nacho Cerda was kind of discovered by all of these fellow genre filmmakers who immediately recognized one of their own and wanted to bring him into the fold. Two of those filmmakers, Richard Stanley and Kareem Hussein, ended up collaborating on the script with Nacho Cerda for this feature film, The Abandoned. It started off as a script that Kareem Hussein had written, then he and Nacho Cerda worked on it together, and then Richard Stanley came in and added his flourish. If you don't recognize the names Kareem Hussein or Richard Stanley, Kareem Hussein is primarily known as a cinematographer these days, but he made his feature debut with a film called Subconscious Cruelty, which made quite a splash. It was a very nasty little piece of work. But since then, he's become kind of the go-to cinematographer for people like Brandon Cronenberg, who used him on his first three films, Antiviral, Possessor, and Infinity Pool. But he also worked with Ted Gilgahan on We Are Still Here and Mohawk. He's also the cinematographer for Orphan First Kill and the new Firestarter reboot. And of course, that great slice of nouveau Canucksploitation, Hobo with a Shotgun. And Richard Stanley, of course, is known as the director of Hardware, Dust Devil, and of course his aborted attempt to do The Island of Dr. Moreau. So you got three real powerhouses that are combining to work on this film. Let's just be clear, Nacho Cerda was going to be the next big thing. Aftermath and Genesis had made huge waves on the festival circuit, and everyone was very excited to see what his first feature film was going to be. The Abandoned was picked up by After Dark Horror Fest, who was doing their 8 films to die for back in 2007, and everyone was very excited to see what this young Spanish filmmaker was going to give us. What he did give us, however, is a very different feeling from what we were coming to expect. I think most people were expecting a very dark and nihilistic piece of cinema. Instead, what we get is a very elegiac ghost story about a woman named Marie Jones, who was born in Russia, where she was orphaned, and she has grown up in England. And she's contacted by somebody in Russia who says that they have discovered information about her family, and she goes to travel to Russia to find out what she can learn about her lost past. Turns out that she's inherited a piece of property, a farm, and so she goes out to the farm to investigate and see what she can find. While she's there, she starts seeing some very mysterious images, including doppelgangers of herself. She also meets a character named Nikolai, who claims to be her long-lost brother. And we start sliding into a world of nightmare logic where they cannot seem to escape their past, and their past keeps literally coming back to haunt them, almost as though they're haunting themselves. Again, I don't think this is what anybody was expecting from Nacho Cerda, and it may have come in an unfortunate time for Nacho Cerda, because at that time we were going through a wave of really dark, violent cinema, and this doesn't necessarily fit in with that. I think another issue that viewers might have had is that unlike The Sixth Sense, the final revelation is not the kind of slap across the face where it really sticks the landing. I feel like people come away from this one perhaps scratching their heads a little and poking their neighbor and going, well, what exactly happened there? It can be a little frustrating sometimes when the whole movie operates around a mystery and we don't necessarily get a clear-cut answer. Now that said, it is a gorgeous looking film. The cinematographer, surprisingly, is not Kareem Hussein, but instead Xavi Jimenez, who is the cinematographer for Genesis, Nacho Cerda's follow-up short film to Aftermath, as well as The Machinist for Brad Anderson and Jaime Balaguero's films The Nameless, Darkness, and Fragile. I also just discovered he was the cinematographer for this great little ghost story Marrowbone from 2017, so check that one out too. Anastasia Hill plays our lead character, Marie Jones. She was a London stage actress and had done some work on TV, but this is one of her first leading feature films. She was also hired just 3 days before production began, so that leads me to believe there was another actress who was originally cast in the role and suddenly became unavailable, and so Anastasia got the call and had to race to Bulgaria where the film was shot. She does a fine job, but her character is a little off-putting, and I think that makes it harder perhaps to connect with her. The actor playing her long-lost brother is Karel Roden, a Czechoslovakian actor who people might recognize from films like Blade 2, Hellboy, Orphan, A Lonely Place to Die. He's worked with Guy Ritchie, he's worked with Paul Greengrass, and he's really a lovely presence here. It's also worth mentioning that I think the poster art doesn't necessarily do the film any favors. It's basically a doll's face with a little bit of like a bloody tear coming out of its eye. All in all, I think it's a very interesting ghost story. I don't know that it's going to appeal to a mass audience. It didn't appeal to a mass audience. And I think now is a time that it's being rediscovered. It's interesting that Unearthed Films decided to pick this film up because if you think about some of their other films that we've covered on the show, things like August Underground and Dead Girl, this doesn't necessarily that kind of extreme horror. And I give them a lot of credit for trying to boost Nacho Cerda's signal. I think this is someone we were expecting some really great things from. And outside of this film, I think he's done maybe one or two other features. I think mostly he's been directing special features for DVD and Blu-ray releases. And speaking of Blu-ray releases, let's take a look at Unearthed Films' The Abandoned. It comes with a nice little slipcover, but it's the same artwork. And there's no alternate artwork. It's a pretty simple package, just the disc with that same image. But Unearthed Films has not skimped one bit on the special features. While there is not a commentary track, we do get 3 retrospective interviews with Kareem Hussein, with Richard Stanley, and with Nacho Cerda, all of which are directed by Zoe Rose Smith, who did a great job with the August Underground interviews, and she does a fantastic job here with all 3 of her subjects. We also get a ton of making of featurettes from that 2007 era when the film was first released. We get interview after interview with Nacho Cerda, all of which again tells me that everyone was thinking this was going to be the next big guy and we want to get as much information as we can about him. But there's some really fun and insightful anecdotes. There's a couple sequences in this film that really are showcase moments. There's a scene where a kitchen from the past basically is resurrected, and you have broken plates fixing themselves and things flying back onto shelves where they once were. It's basically a resurrection of the room as it once was, and that is just an amazing moment. If nothing else, that scene is one that is very, very memorable for this film. There's also a couple of wild boars that end up becoming quite pivotal to the plot. And Nacho Cerda talks about having those boars on set and making every effort for his actors not to be eaten by these boars. There's also a little interview sequence where Douglas Buck and Nacho Cerda have a conversation together. Douglas Buck is another person who had an incredible short film called Cutting Moments. Again, I think everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing, and that didn't come to pass either. So it's interesting that those two had found each other back in 2007 and immediately connected. There are also several outtakes and deleted scenes. There are some alternate endings. I think there are like 3 or 4 alternate endings, which is, again, I kind of go back to the idea of that this film really wanted to have a humdinger of an ending, and I just don't think we got that. The fact that they were still kind of exploring a lot of different options tells me they hadn't settled on what was going to be that one that was just going to nail it. It's a rather soft landing. I think it all makes sense, but maybe I'm just slow. And the package is wrapped up with some nice photo galleries and trailers. This is a situation where I think behind the scenes information helps us really appreciate the film that's in front of us. Now, it's not to say you shouldn't be able to enjoy the film on its own merits, but I think watching the process and all of the obstacles that they had to overcome in order to bring that story to the screen, I think that's interesting, and I think it helps us enjoy the film even more. So that's The Abandoned from Unearthed Films. You can pick it up now on Blu-ray. Let us know your thoughts below in the comments. And I'll also have another 5 titles below in the description of this video. You let me know what you'd like to see taken off the stack. Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.